Welcome to the Empowered Team Podcast. I'm your host, Kari Schneider. And guess what? Today, we have one of those topics that creeps up on you, sneaks up on you. It's burnout, but specifically the burnout illusion. Why high performers are crashing quietly. You know that person? I know. That person who you're like, they can do it all. They're doing it all. They are crushing it. And then they come down with complete exhaustion or an illness, or they can't seem to function in their role. What is going on? Why is this burnout happening to these high performers? We're going to distinguish between high performers and high achievers. We're going to point out the exact signs and symptoms of this burnout that can show up. We're going to show you how to reframe and get into a high achiever status instead of just high performing. Boom. Let us go. So this is it. Are you one of these people? Are you exhausted even when you're doing everything right? So here's a stat for you. High performers are 2 times more likely to burn out due to self-imposed standards. This is from Harvard Business Review back in 2021, but I want you to really hear that part. Self-imposed standards. This isn't about the pressure from other people. This isn't about a specific deadline. This is about self-imposed standards. There's a real key thing about high performers here, and it is that high performers tend to be really busy. They keep performing. But there's a very big difference that I want to point to. There's a huge difference between performing and achieving, between being busy and getting results, between being a manager of actions and a manager of outcomes. Please distinguish between those things, because many of us are going so hard and doing so much, and we're not realizing that we are missing what's possible. What's possible are outcomes and achievements without the exhaustion. So let's take a look. We're unpacking high performers, the best of the best, quietly crashing while the high achievers aren't. Why is that? Okay, I want to distinguish between the two. Here's the high performer. The high performer is continuously on. Like, we're talking go, go, go. There's never an off button. It's rarely downtime. It's usually crash into bed at night. It's that kind of thing. Whereas the high achiever is goal or result oriented, not just being on all the time, but focused on the result. So there's the two. Here's another example. High performer would be focused on image, consistency, delivery. However, the high achiever is focused on progress, benchmarks. So these are the milestones towards a goal, the completion, and the outcomes. So notice that the performer is image, consistency, delivery, always putting out there, hello, that's been me. I'm thinking, okay, consistency is great. Delivery is good. Got to make sure that's happening. But the achiever is focused on progress. Is this moving the needle? Are we reaching our benchmarks? Are we making the outcome, or are we continually performing? This is something I'm bringing to the table for this podcast topic because it's so familiar with me. I'm quite literally a recovering overperformer and going towards becoming an achiever, not an overachiever. I tend to coach a lot of overachievers, but being an achiever versus an overachiever or overperformer. Here's another one. High performers are often praise-driven. They want the external validation, whereas a high achiever is driven internally. They want to see this through because it feels so good. This is part of who they are. And the high performer lives in the how I'm doing. So how am I performing versus the high achiever living into what I'm creating. And from a personal standpoint for me, I literally can see in my life and the life outcomes how this transition and this transformation is happening because of the results that I'm producing in the world. So really, really cool thing. So this is the thing that I think will bring into the link to burnout. Because you're thinking, well, what's the problem? Even if somebody's not a high achiever and they're performing really well and there's a lot of things getting done, that could be a good thing too, right? It can, except there's a cost. There's a cost because the high performers tend to run high on sympathetic nervous system. They call this a sympathetic tone. And when this is happening, there's a constant cortisol drip. That means that you are in a state of somewhat flight or fight on the regular. It's on, go, go, go. Whereas there needs to be that dial down, literally turning the volume down, turning the speed down, taking the foot off the gas pedal, taking a breath, pausing. That is the balance that needs to happen physiologically for us to even keep going. So, what does that look like? That looks like being an achiever, performing for results, not just performing all of the actions. So, there's something I want to highlight, and there's a quote, and it says, "You can't be in performance mode all the time unless your goal is breakdown." Think about that. You're not going to be in performance all of the time unless your goal is burnout, breakdown, injury. And I want you to think of this in the context of high performance sport. When I used to work with an Olympic track athlete, swimmer, gymnast, and these types of athletes, individual sport athletes, these type of athletes, because it was so intense to peak for something like an Olympics or an Olympic qualifier or a world championships, then what's happening is that athlete is looking to peak usually 1 to 3 times per year, and that's it. Because physically, mentally, emotionally, they just can't peak more than that because there's so much that goes into that. If they just performed all at that highest level all of the time, that means they have injury or burnout. They can't do it. It's impossible. So if there's constant high level performance, it means that there will not be the second peak. It can't happen. There needs to be a dip. There needs to be recovery. And we know this in high performance sport, but most people don't know this in real life. And then they wonder why something sets them back. Maybe it's chronic headaches. Maybe it's mental exhaustion. Maybe it's a physical breakdown. So keep this in mind because it is impossible to keep performing at the highest level without some sort of consistent break or plan for those breaks. So the reason I call this a quiet burnout in performers is because they don't look burnt out. They're doing all the time, and that was me. And for me, then I found that first it started with headaches. Then it was I couldn't seem to get over colds. I would get more colds. And then eventually I couldn't walk properly because I had 2 crushed discs in my back. Well, here I was coaching some of the best people in the world and really top achievers in life and coaching them all about the recovery, all about the work ethic and the recovery and how they blend together. But my life didn't permit that recovery. I wasn't fitting my recovery in because I didn't think I could, which was the false belief on my end. So the high performers don't look burnt out because they keep being high functioning. But as they're high functioning, somewhere there's a huge leak. They're depleted somewhere. It might be in their relationship. It might be in their thinking, as in mental exhaustion. They might feel really snappy all the time. There's something that is depleted. But the rewards of doing keep reinforcing this performance loop. And it's this false feedback system because it's not actually yielding the type of results that they really want. There's a researcher called Christina Maslach, and this person has a burnout inventory. And it's emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, reduced personal accomplishment. Really let that land. If you are going towards burnout, you're going to experience something in one or all of these zones of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. And I know for me, because I've experienced burnout, that's exactly what was going on, but I couldn't see it at the time because the drive to keep going for my family, for the business, for all the things was just so strong. And if you're relating to this, that's just take the pause for a second, because some of these things are really going to land. I know that there was a banker I was working with, and she had reached the top levels of banking and just could not find any peace. She couldn't find peace. Her body was exhausted. She was never feeling good. And yet she'd reached this high level. And then once at that high level, she could not sustain it because her body was failing her. She had pushed and pushed and pushed for so long, for so many other things, so many other people, and then her body couldn't sustain her. Very familiar with that, I am. And consider Olympic level athletes, same thing. If their performance isn't managed really well and pulled back so that they can recover, there's no way they're going to go to a second Olympics. There's no way that they're going to make the qualifier and then go to the Olympics. And the great example for this, I'll tell you this, is that when you see a world championship and you look at a sport like track and you see records broken like crazy, world records broken, but then you see Olympic records at the Olympics. Quite often, world records aren't broken in the Olympics because that athlete peaked at the world championships to qualify for the Olympics. If you follow me here, what that means is that that person had to perform and get the best results they've ever gotten in the world, hence the world records broken at the world championships, because that was the qualifier for the Olympics. That was the main peaking event. And so when the Olympics came, they're coming off of that peak. They can't sustain that high performance. That's why there are lots of Olympic records broken at the Olympics, but very, very few world records broken at the Olympics. Take that example to understand that's the same thing for real life. We can't keep performing at the top level. There has to be recovery. So keep that in mind. Another example I've seen way too many times, and this is often in men, and it's often in men who are founders or they've exited their company and they've been pushing so hard as a founder, and then when they go to exit, life gets better, right? But they wonder why they feel so drained and so depleted and so empty once the exit is complete. Meanwhile, they just reached the goal that they were going for. But along the way, they didn't realize that they needed to take care of what was going on for them mentally and physically in order to be able to cross the finish line and have a life and have a self and have some energy and have some health. So it's a big deal. So here are some red flags. I want you to see these red flags, and we're going into some categories so that you can really identify in different zones. It's going to be different in different areas. So let's look at mental and cognitive. Mental and cognitive, you're going to see things like decision fatigue. Even small choices feel heavy. And when I had this illness, this Graves' disease, I was so sick, I couldn't book a plane flight. For me to create directions on a map to go to even places I had been before felt almost impossible. My brain could not quite work. I was physically burnt out with an illness. So this decision of fatigue, even small choices feel heavy. Hyper focus on performance metrics, so obsessing over KPIs, but ignoring whether that KPI or that performance indicator has impact. Is this the right thing to measure? If it's not the right thing to measure, why are we focusing so heavily on it? I know I've done that in my business because it's like, well, we have to focus on something, but does this even matter? And that ends up being the question. Decreased creativity. Not being able to come up with ideas, solutions, innovations, solving problems like before. That decreased creativity is a sign, this quiet sign of burnout. That feeling like, I just need a break. I need a second to think. And then when you do have a second to think, it's foggy. You have this brain fog that just isn't quite working. Brain feels slow, maybe even glitchy, or you can't keep your attention where you want to. And another one for mental is that we overanalyze so many things. We've got this inner critic going on overdrive. Just analysis, and here we go. And it's often negative. So those are just some of the mental and the cognitive. Behavioral, this ends up manifesting into an action in life. So some sort of behavior going on. And this is where you might notice it more. Working longer, producing less. So you're less effective. Really. Effort is up, output is down. You're avoiding delegation because you have this quiet thought. And listen to the last episode of our podcast, 1, 2, 3, delegate. This is critical for this. So go back to that episode, 1, 2, 3, delegate. When we avoid delegation, there's this quiet thought that says something like, no one can do it right, or no one can do it like I can, or I might as well do it myself because I'll get it done faster. There's these little things that we tell ourselves, and it's really not conducive to what we really want when it comes to our overall results in the long run. Withdrawing from meaningful conversations, we're just going through the motions. There's no real presence. There's no real connection. We're just getting the interaction done with so that we can get on to the other thing that we're trying to perform at. Compulsive productivity. So when we're not working, there's guilt. You try going on a vacation, good luck, because you got to have the computer, you got to check the emails, you got to have this draw, this pull. Now that's different than designating your time and pre-planning that you're going to check some emails, go through them at X time during X day, and on this vacation, you're not doing it on the other days or whatever. That's very different. That's pre-planned and you're free. But I'm talking about when you don't feel free and you feel pulled back to the thing constantly, that not working guilt. And then micro-controlling, this constant fuel of fear of failure has us touching in on everything because we don't want to let it go, don't want it to fail in any way. Now, there are the physical byproducts. Now, notice how we've gone this mental and the cognitive into some of the actual behaviors that are going on, and then some physical things that go on as well. Because this is what happens. It goes down the line. As you keep going, you're going to see more and more going on with the behavioral, and then with the physical. You're going to notice emotional drawbacks. So this is some of the physical signs and symptoms. Tension in your jaw, especially your traps, headaches at the back of your neck, headaches in your temples or over your eyes. So tight shoulders, tension in your gut, changes in your sleep pattern, difficult winding down, waking up early, but you're waking up wired instead of feeling rested. Energy crashes, especially in mid-afternoon. So somewhere around 2 p.m., just feeling like you're really hitting a wall. Finding at nighttime, you are almost getting wired before bedtime. You feel like you're tired, you're exhausted, but then you kind of get wired before bedtime. Increase in inflammation or in illness. So your immune system, because of this cortisol constantly being going on, drip, 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 it never gets a break. And when it doesn't get a break, your immune system is taxed. And that's going to eventually lead to hormonal dysregulation, not just in women, but really impacting women a lot, but also in men. They'll find that the cortisol is up. They don't feel like they've got libido. They don't feel like they've got the drive that they normally would have. So it's both in women and men, and it often just manifests in different ways with hormonal dysregulation. Now let's go into the emotional. Blunted joy. It kind of goes, you're in the zone because you can't handle a more profound emotion like bliss or joy. It's too much when you're dealing with all that you're dealing with. And then you might achieve something, but you're kind of numb. You don't feel much. Even if something really bad happens or really good happens, you find you're kind of like indifferent or numb. And then you've got this irritability, but it's masked in what we say to other people as urgency. So you might be snappy. Oh, I really have to go. I have to get to this. Or this is really important right now. We don't have time. Persistent anxiety, low-grade panic, kind of bracing yourself for the worst happening. And then this sense of emptiness despite success, meaning there's no real internal celebration. This shame for not feeling grateful or happy, but then you try to feel positive, but you really don't. So this emotional drain is costly, and there's nothing wrong with you or me having gone through this. It's that this is the byproduct of overperforming for so long, and I have been there, not realizing that I'm contorting myself to perform, thinking that somehow I will be accepted or loved in the world. Now, that's usually the root of it, but let's take a look at how it's happening in performers a little more, because it creates an existential, sometimes tension, or even existential crises. And this is where the disconnection from purpose. What I find, especially in male clients, is that when a man doesn't have purpose, then everything else feels very empty. And a purpose could be career related. It can also be family. It could also be having some sort of impact in community. But when a man feels that they have purpose for other people, for something that's larger than themselves, it really mitigates the emptiness. But when there's a disconnection from purpose and they realize they've just been going through the motions, then success feels meaningless. And that's what often happens for some people who have overperformed in exiting a company. So then they end up building existentially, they build this resentment, toward the work that they used to love. Now that happened to me. I was coaching at high performance level, had my own business, still have my own business. But before I transitioned, I was starting to resent the thing I love so much. It was my purpose. I love coaching. I love making a difference for others. And then suddenly I was like, why am I not wanting to do this? Why do I not feel fulfilled? But it was because I wasn't getting a break. I needed a break desperately, and it just wasn't happening because I wasn't creating it or allowing it. And then there's this internal identity crisis where it goes, if I stop performing and I stop doing all the things that I've been doing, who am I? Who am I then? Where does that leave me without all of the actions I constantly take? What does that mean for me and my future and my value, my worth? It becomes really challenging for people in these situations. And then we really don't want to let others down. We feel like if we don't do all the things that they're not going to like us. And the thing is that we're often making that up in our minds. They understand, most of the other people understand that we aren't going to be robots and go all the time. But we don't get that. And we keep performing accordingly. And that's what creates the hard part. So I've kind of painted a pretty dismal picture here. You ready for the reframe? Are you ready to really cause and see the shifts? This is what it looks like to shift. It means, number one, I'm going to give you 3 reframes here so that there are real tangible things that you can make a shift in. And it doesn't mean a massive overhaul, but really a shift that allows you to see what's possible. So look at this one. Instead of constantly having the pressure of a deadline or the pressure of the achievement, it's about the progress. So redefine success by the effort towards the purpose. Seeing the effort towards the purpose is the progress. We might not have hit the exact marks, but we've continued to put the effort in towards the purpose. So this might be, instead of constantly chasing revenue growth, burning the candle at both ends, feeling like failing despite surpassing growth targets, instead shifting, defining success as the effort towards that purpose, investing in the team growth, mentoring the rising leaders, and the growth in revenue becomes the byproduct, developing new offers aligned with the mission. The byproduct is the money coming in, which is amazing. The result is emotional relief, better progress markers, sustainable pace, renewable satisfaction. So that's a little shift that becomes profound in its change in how it feels. Instead of pressure, going towards progress. And how about this one? Instead of performing constantly, we want to pulse this performance. It's going to be off and on and off and on and off and on. That's the kind of performance. It doesn't mean that you're going to be this person that's inconsistent, but rather it means that you're recovered enough to stay performing. If you keep trying to perform at all costs, you're not going to be able to. So you give yourself syncing your energy cycles with work and rest. Your nervous system needs to thrive on this. going for work sprints instead of constant. So it's a 1 week sprint on a certain thing and a 1 week recovery and maintenance. And maybe it's a 2 week sprint and a 1 week maintenance. So founders who are focused on 24/7, go, 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 make this happen, I've got to do everything. That's the kind of thing that causes reactive mode, constant panic mode. And we want to shift into recharging cycles and make sure that the blocks on a daily, I should make a podcast on this. The daily blocks are on 90-minute cycles. This is called an ultradian rhythm. It's part of our circadian rhythm, and it's how our brain works. And if we ignore this ultradian rhythm, this 90-minute cycle, I'll do more of an in-depth podcast on this, then our body forces our break. We either get distracted, we need to take a snack break or a bathroom break, and we find that then when we come back to that 90-minute cycle, we're highly, highly effective and more efficient. When we try to push through that 90-minute cycle and ignore what we need, then we lose our efficiency and it degrades all the rest of the day. So we need these recharge cycles of 15 minutes within 90-minute cycles. So focusing on the blocks, walking meetings, breath resets before decisions, making sure you're at your emotional baseline before your decision making so you've given yourself what you need. This is a huge shift. So the next one, the third one, so we've got instead of constant pressure, we're talking about progress. Instead of constant performance, we're talking about pulses of energy. Instead of perfection, we're talking about prioritization. So letting go of the optics of perfection, doubling down on your values, doubling down on your purpose. That's where you're going to find the real results. So instead of polishing that keynote, making it perfect, come from the heart. If you know your values, you know who you are, you know what the company or what your family is up to, then it doesn't matter that you deliver the exact right words. What matters is that what comes out is meaningful. That's what you find on these podcasts. Once I understand the concept that I want to deliver, I come from the heart. I try to give you the facts. I try to give you tools and techniques, but you can feel and tell that either I've experienced it or have proximity to it. And I feel how impactful this can be for other people and deliver that. And this personal topic has been very impactful for me. Okay. So how I want to wrap this up really is that if you're feeling you're constantly on, but you're finding that inside you're off, then you may be overperforming and it may be time to give yourself what you really need. And I say this to my family all the time because it works for me so much. Pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what do I need? Pause, breathe, what do I need? I invite you, DM me if you see this on social, on YouTube, DM me the word pause, just so that you can pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what do I need? There it is. All right. So you don't need to be in burnout. You can go into high achiever mode instead of high performance while you're constantly feeling drained and really going towards burnout. We don't want that. We want you feeling empowered. Why? Because you're up to big things. You serve a lot of people, and it's really, really important that you can take care of you. All right, go forth and have a wonderful day and a great rest of your week.